Welcome to the Land to Lots podcast, powered by Launch Development Finance Advisors. And now your host, Carter Froelich.
Hello, everyone. This is Carter Froelich, and welcome back to the Land to Lots podcast. This is the final part of our series with Paul Johnson, the former executive vice president of the Rancho Mission Viejo company, as well as Teri, Slavik, Suki, the founder of TNT Inc. In this episode, we will be discussing the visioning, planning, and executing of the development of a master plan community.
Ranch Life is an organization all connected. So we have the Rancho MMC, the Master Maintenance Corporation. Ranch Life is the social programming overlay, and Ranch Ride. When a buyer goes into escrow, Ranch Life reaches out to that home buyer, and from that day forth, they can be a part of the community. They're given access, temporary access. Go check out the clubs, go to these events. We make sure that they know there's a lot more, because perhaps not every builder can get all that story out. So then we're helping that builder by connecting very quickly to assure that we have very low cancellations, because oftentimes once they go, oh, wow, now I get it. I get what this whole place is about, makes their decision a lot more comfortable. We don't want any regrets.
Paul's right. By reducing the rescission rate or the cancellation rate, I mean, that ultimately helps the builders, right? Which then, of course, ultimately helps us in future phase land sales. So it comes back again and again. Partnership, collaboration, lifting the tent, helping each other look outside in, not just from what we've always known and we've always done, but really putting tools and processes and opportunities in place, whether it's test driving the community or other ways, to make this really a collective, collaborative effort.
One of the things when it comes to soft programming, and this may be just my bias, and if so, I apologize in advance, but I always think that nothing is more important to people than other people in that social interaction. Yeah, and I just remember, living on Balboa Island, we would walk around the island all the time, but nobody would pay attention to the water or what was going on in the water. But we would be able to look in somebody's house and go, you know what, they got a new couch. and so to that end, and as it relates to the social interaction and amenities, we talk about the amenity arms race. How important are the clubs, the weightlifting places where you can do aerobics versus being able to just get people to come together to listen to an impromptu concert, take a walk? How do you balance that physical, big, expensive club or amenity center, if I can use that, with other things that are more kind of free flowing and can be a lot of different spaces depending upon, what time of year or what the group is that's activating these spaces?
Yeah, I think you build spaces that are multi-purpose. I think you build spaces that can scale, that can support the large scale semi-annual signature events, provided you can afford that financially in a pro forma. Clearly, you have to have the land mass to do that, as Paul alluded to earlier with the retail question. And I think you build spaces that allow for smaller gatherings and smaller connections. One of the things we did during the pandemic was founded the America at Home study, which was a longitudinal study over 3 phases where we asked 3,000 consumers each time what they cared most about in home and community. And what was really interesting is the social connection, bringing people together, was really the number one built amenity they wanted. The top 3, this in spades, are always trails, access to outdoor space, and nature, or views of nature. Those, no matter how you ask it, no matter what market in the country, those will always be your top 3. The number one built amenity, so physical infrastructure, was something that was a place where people could walk and get a coffee or have a casual restaurant where they could get together with other people. So, how do we provide that opportunity for social and emotional connection in a community that goes, again, beyond the obvious trails and walking and physical activities? So I think you just need to plan an amenity strategy that allows for both, and that allows for people to opt in and opt out. Some demographics are more inclined to enjoy, programmed, planned activities, all of the clubs that Paul alluded to that Ranch Life does better than anybody else. And others are more inclined to enjoy smaller groups. That's different in terms of different ethnic backgrounds as well. And I think it goes back to understanding who the people are and what their motivators are for living inside of your community, and then using that to develop your amenity strategy.
And Teri said it perfectly. We pay attention to the residents, and our amenity strategy is allowing them all gradations of social connection. Some people move in and they don't want to connect at all. They just love the fact everybody is connected and they feel better. To those who want to run a club, who want to run the semi-annual 4th of July parades. So if you just pay attention to that gradation and allow for the multi-levels of how people want to feel they're socializing, you'll be a success, but it takes effort. So Ranch Life is funded in perpetuity. We have transfer fees that will sustain it for the life of the forever. And that was important. Trying to start social and run it off of your pro forma, off the builder's financial back, will at some point break down because someone will go, we're not doing that anymore. We're not doing 3 semi-annual events. We're going to do one. Now you've taken your people, your community, your home buyers who you've been telling them this, and you take things away. Our goal was we start small, we have the money to do this. And as we added more residents, more transfer fees, we grew, and now they know it's going to be one day theirs to operate. So think about doing it, but think about how it's going to be sustainable, because I don't think it's really fun for a homeowner to be sold one thing and 5 years later things are disappearing. You're not getting what they want.
Yeah, and I just want everybody to really understand what Paul just said. So you at the ranch charge a transfer fee of how many basis points for
it's moved, and it's around 1/4 to 3/8 of a percent. On the retail. So there's a first time fee, which comes when the house is initially sold. And then in perpetuity, every resale, there is a transfer fee paid either by the seller or by the new buyer that is going in to really run what is Ranch Life and Ranch Ride and all of those components. And the great thing about it is, over all of these years, from Ladera Ranch, because we were doing it there, to here, I don't think we've ever had one person. We may have had a few that didn't pay it, and we're not going to go sue them, but it's been minute, 0.001% who don't go, well, this is why I moved here. I got great value. My house is worth more than I thought it was. So we've never really had a problem with people doing that transfer fee because of how vibrant the social programming is there in Rancho Mission Viejo.
And that funds Ranch Life, the lifestyle director, the staff to run this, that builds the community, why everybody's there. And that they don't have to worry about their HOA going up.
Well, your HOA, so the master, that's a whole different, that's managing the hard assets. And as a CPA, inflation, things go up.
I stepped into that one.
We're trying to understand where it is going. But that's different than Ranch Life, which is really running social programming and funding the people that are there to help residents put on these events.
Okay. We've talked about the physical plant, as I call it. We've talked about soft programming. All of this coming in to, what is the payoff? And there's a lot of different payoffs. But as it relates to most of our listeners who are in the development home building industry, we talked, and I think Paul and Teri, you both brought this up. Are we a supply provider, supply side master plan community, or are we a demand generator? I think in terms of the iPod, the iPhone, people didn't know they needed it, until they saw it or they lived in it. So can you just discuss the interplay of the two and how what we're doing or what you're doing at the ranch is, and what I would argue is creating a demand generator?
demand.
So
I'll
stop there.
Terry, I'll go quickly and then I'll let you add a lot of detail. And I'll harken back to, how this all began. The family, started back in the mid 1960s when the 5 freeway came and touched the northern boundary of the ranch, and they decided, well, maybe we could sell it like all the big landowners were doing, but they said no. Why don't we go into being community developers? And that approach they took when they started Mission Viejo was, hey, we're out in the hinterlands. We're going to do more. Tony's always been very family oriented. The philosophy started then to create great places that weren't just match. So 4 things: match, draft, benchmark, or pioneer. A lot of what was happening in the 60s was just matching and drafting. You didn't have to do much, but Tony was a little further out, and the families, they were pioneering. They were of a mindset to be creative, to add the club, to have the sports teams, to, golf courses where they built a golf course. They, built Lake Mission Viejo. That is always permeated what we do. And the members that work for Rancho carry that philosophy. So it is being focused on, and you say today it's an infill. Well, yes, it's a lot more of an infill, but we're still at the hinterland. But it is just part of wanting to be creative and delivering as much value, because that value comes right back in how fast you'll absorb, in innovative products reaching to the ground. It all tumbles into a better financial outcome. And we continue to be a demand generator because that's just what we do. We didn't do 55 plus 2,000 units, put them in a gate. That's where the old people are. We did intergenerational living because now we have 55 plus coming from a lot wider territory. They're coming from out of state now, coming back from those places where they had to go to be closer to their family. It's a fun intermix of a lot of ideas.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great example, Paul. And I'll share a case study example from another state, an out of market that's a real world example that happened. And I love that you said match, draft, benchmark, and pioneer, because our chairman and CEO at Newland, Bob McLeod, was on a college tour with his son, looking at land in North Carolina outside the Raleigh submarket. And at that point, we had just put land under contract for a community that would become Briar Chapel, which we opened the day Lehman crashed in 2008 after 7 years of entitlement struggles. But as Bob was looking for that land, he discovered a community not far down the road of an NVR community, basically, NV Ryan Homes. And he came back to home office and sat us all down, the executive committee, and said, we're in trouble. Our underwriting, our pro forma in Briar Chapel assumes a 15% price premium on what NVR is doing down the road with exactly the same product and exactly the same builder. So his initial reaction was to match an intentionally planned and thoughtfully developed master plan to a builder subdivision. And what that did was it raised the bar and required us to say, we need to build demand for this community that's different than a builder subdivision down the road. Because remember what I said earlier, home shoppers are looking at both of us. And if I can buy a home that's a commodity down the road for 15% less, why would I pay that much to be inside a master plan community? And once we understand that, and we understand that that's a different game, I think it really ups the ante to require us, again, I'll come back to it, to ask who will live here and how do they want to live, and then make the right financial decisions within the bounds of our business plans and our pro formas to say, do we invest $14 million in a clubhouse, or do we invest $6 million in a clubhouse? And do we disperse other amenities around the community so that those NVR buyers have a really great, active, engaging park in their neighborhood as well? So they will make a choice to spend more money with us than they would a home down the road.
Yeah. Excellent. And guys, we're running out of time. And I just want to say, Paul, thank you. Teri, thank you so much for taking this time. And if you're willing, I would love to have another podcast at some point we'll give you a little rest, but I've got so many more questions, and this has just been such a thought-provoking and just so many years of experience wrapped up in this hour and a half, and I'm sure our podcast listeners are going to love it.
So Carter, let me say this was so enjoyable. Fun conversation, kind of ran all over the place, but that's what makes this podcast great. Teri, it was fun to do it with you. Would love if Carter likes to drag us in again. I'd enjoy doing a round two.
Well, you guys have done a great job. Thanks, everybody. This concludes the final part of our series on visioning, planning, and executing a master plan community. I will be providing in our show notes the conceptual or the specific plan of planning area 3. I'll be putting Paul's contact information, Teri's contact information. Feel free to access the show notes as part of your listening. Paul, Teri, thank you again. And I just encourage all of our listeners, if you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your team members. And if you thought this thought-provoking, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You have been listening to the Land to Lots podcast with Carter Froelich. Follow us wherever you find your podcast to never miss a new episode.